Order, please. The time is now 4:07. We will go till 5:07 for oral questions put by members. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, my question is through you to the Premier. Giving working families lower taxes on household essentials like energy was one of the 7 key priorities in the Premier's 2006 platform, Rodney MacDonald's plan for a stronger Nova Scotia. Now Nova Scotians have learned that just like in 2003, a Conservative tax promise in a Conservative platform isn't worth the glossy paper it's written on. So my question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Premier is this: why have you renounced one of the 7 key priorities in your election platform?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise in my place, Mr. Speaker, following the address by our Minister of Finance to announce our 7th consecutive balanced budget. A budget that focuses on the priorities of Nova Scotians, and Mr. Speaker, in many areas of that budget provides tax relief and puts dollars into the hands of hard-working families throughout our province.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fact is that by breaking one of his 7 key commitments from the last election campaign, the Premier is imposing an 8% increase on the cost of electricity for nearly 380,000 households in this province. This is being piled on to the increases in other energy costs like gasoline, heating oil, increases that have already put severe strains on household budgets. So my question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Premier, is how can the Premier justify imposing an electricity price increase on Nova Scotia families at this time?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I can appreciate my honourable colleague is attempting to confuse the situation, Mr. Speaker. But the reality, Mr. Speaker, is this, Mr. Speaker: Nova Scotians will receive the 8% HST, Mr. Speaker, for their heating, essential heating, Mr. Speaker, whether it's oil or above the over 27 kilowatt hours in the day, Mr. Speaker. It's very broad-based, and including, Mr. Speaker, and I heard it time and time again from Mr. Speaker, the members on the opposite benches suggesting that we should do more for low-income Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. But we agree, Mr. Speaker. We agree. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why. That's why a low-income Nova Scotian who not only gets the oil rebate, HST rebate, not only perhaps receives some portion of their HST, Mr. Speaker, that 8% on other electrical, will also receive the $200 potentially, Mr. Speaker, rebate through the new HARP program, Mr. Speaker. So this is making a difference where a difference needs to be made.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think Nova Scotian families are confused. They remember when this Premier went out on the election hustings and went out and
Order,
told
please.
people.
Order. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Premier made a commitment to the people of Nova Scotia. He said that home energy costs, we're no longer going to have the HST on them. And now, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia families are going to be hit with higher power rates. They have been hit already with higher power rates in 3 of the last 4 years, and the 8% Conservative power price increase that takes effect in 2 weeks is one of the single biggest hikes in a generation. So my question to the Premier is this: can he tell hard-working Nova Scotians how this electricity increase, one of the highest in recent years, is going to build a stronger Nova Scotia?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Speaker, the NDP think there's an endless pit of money in this province, Mr. Speaker. That's what they're saying, Mr. Speaker. Nothing about affordability, nothing about getting to those who really need the help, Mr. Speaker. This government is going to make sure that low-income Nova Scotians get the help they need, and that's what our program is
about.
The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Today we have seen that this government is committed to high gas prices in this province. The Premier refuses to put forward any policy that would help the pocketbooks of consumers. Gas regulation and high gas taxes continue to make our province uncompetitive, and it continues to drive business out of this province. So my question to the Premier is, why do you continue to refuse to deal with the high price of gas in this province?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, there are many investments made in the budget to assist Nova Scotians in a variety of areas, whether that's through new recreational infrastructure in their communities, Mr. Speaker, the healthy living tax incentive, Mr. Speaker, many other tax incentives putting dollars back into their hands, Mr. Speaker. The reality is, as I've said time and time again, we need those dollars by law, Mr. Speaker, to go back into our highways. And I'm sure my honourable colleague is not suggesting, Mr. Speaker, that this province go back to what it was doing in the 1990s, back into deficits and a growing debt, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Premier won the leadership, the price of gas in this province was 92 cents a litre. The price of gas is now well over $1.30 a litre. This government has not done one thing to help lower the price of gas. In fact,
Order, please.
In fact, they've continually put forward policies that keep the price of gas high. The evidence is clear. This government is committed to high gas prices in this province. So my question to the Premier is, how high does the price of gas have to go before you stop gouging consumers in the province of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Liberal Party wants this province to go back into a deficit, Mr. Speaker, and a growing debt. It might be that the way for that party, Mr. Speaker, is not the way for this government, Mr. Speaker. The 7th consecutive balanced budget in this province, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Liberal Party wants business to be competitive in this province and the Premier to take his hands out of the pockets. And every Thursday this week, him and the Minister of Municipal Services stick their hand in the pockets of Nova Scotia consumers.
I think you're pretty close to the line.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier needs to look at this issue not as a struggling politician trying to hold on to his pride, but as a small business owner or a consumer in this province who are falling behind on hard times. Stats Canada reported yesterday that Nova Scotia is the lowest real GDP growth in Canada. We have all heard of struggling business along the border due to the 10% difference with New Brunswick, and yet this does not concern our Premier. So my question to the Premier is, how long do Nova Scotians have to suffer before you address the price of gas in the province?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, if my honourable colleague is asking me if I'm proud to be a Nova Scotian, Mr. Speaker. I am proud of a great province, Mr. Speaker, that is growing each and every year, Mr. Speaker, that is investing in priorities like a new farmer care program for all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, that is investing in making our roads better from one end of the province to the other, investing in making business grow, Mr. Speaker. It is not by accident that there are over 20,000 new jobs in this province during the past 6 years. It is as a result of good decision-making by this government.
The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question will be through you. My question will be through you to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, in 2006, the Premier stood on people's doorsteps. He knocked on their doors. He may have even went into their house, and he made a commitment to them, Mr. Speaker. And today, he has decided not to keep that commitment. Now, I don't know what they call that in Mabu, but I do know what they call it in Milton, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under measures announced in the budget, 380,000 households in Nova Scotia will be paying more for electricity.
Order.
This tax grab will put some $30 million more in government coffers. At most, only a third of that extra revenue will be redirected to assist low-income Nova Scotians through the HARP program. So my question to the Premier is this, through you, Mr. Speaker, is why is he planning to grab nearly $30 million from electricity users while returning only a small portion to help low-income Nova Scotians with their heating costs?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, a broad-based program that is helping Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, and specifically low-income Nova Scotians makes absolute sense. So, Mr. Speaker, Last week, Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague suggested that a new nursing home wasn't being built, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the walls are going up, and I don't know what they call it in his area, but I know what they call that in my area. Oh, yes.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, reimposing...
Order, please. Order. Order, please.
Mr. Speaker, reimposing the electricity tax on Nova Scotians will raise a lot of money for the government, but very little of that will be used to help those on low incomes. In fact, Mr. Speaker, under the Premier's new plan, the net home heating assistance for people on low incomes will be less than half of what it was under the old Keep the Heat program. So my question to the Premier is this: why, at a time of soaring prices for home heating costs, would he bring forward a program that provides so few benefits for the neediest among us?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, the program is designed to help those Nova Scotians who need our help. I heard the Leader of the Opposition and all colleagues in the legislature suggesting that the government should do more with regards to providing a direct assistance program. Mr. Speaker, through the announcement today, through the budget, the government has done just that, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it is the Nova Scotian way to help those who are in need of help, Mr. Speaker. And we also have to find a balance between helping those who need our help and making sure that these programs are affordable. Today's announcement in the budget, Mr. Speaker, does just that.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With this electricity tax, the Premier has abandoned one of the 7 key commitments made in the 2006 election platform. He has abandoned his pledge of lower taxes on household essentials like energy. So my question, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Premier is this: what other priorities in his platform, or in today's budget for that matter, does he plan to abandon next?
The Honourable, the Premier.
Speaker. I can't believe it. Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. There'll be no more breaks before question period.
Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. The Honourable, the Premier.
My colleague suggests that the opposition leader has abandoned common sense, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps he's right. Mr. Speaker, again, the government has found a balance in moving forward with this program. A balance between providing HST relief to our fellow Nova Scotians and, Mr. Speaker, to ensuring that there is additional relief for low-income Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, I find it hard to believe that he's speaking out against helping those who are in most need of help, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is through you to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, budget security is taken very seriously because the contents of the budget can be used for many things, including, Mr. Speaker, personal gain. That is why a lockup is held. Last night, the CTV Evening News from Halifax carried an accurate report of the single most significant item in today's budget, the new 8% tax on household electricity. This news item has direct relevance for a publicly traded corporation, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to ask the Premier this: how does the Premier explain this extraordinary breach of usual budget security?
The Honourable, the Premier. Well, Mr. Speaker, I share my honourable colleague's concern in that regard, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, we take this issue, as with every issue, around the budget very seriously, Mr. Speaker. And I do appreciate that he's raised the issue. It's certainly something I've already raised with members of the government.
The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this morning the Halifax Herald reported additional details from the budget. These details are directly attributed to a source within government. That same government source appears to have confirmed the electricity tax hike a day before the budget, knowing that Nova Scotia Power is a publicly traded, regulated corporation, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Premier is this: will the Premier report what he has done to determine who in his government provided that information in breach of all of the measures taken to ensure that no one can benefit from advanced knowledge of the budget.
The Honourable the Premier.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is stretching a long bow, but Mr. Speaker, I indicated, of course, that's a concern for me, and I share that concern that he has, Mr. Speaker. But what is this issue all about? This issue is about a program that is helping low-income Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. I'm more concerned with ensuring that the heat is on in the homes of my fellow Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker.
The Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious question about something that all Nova Scotians should be concerned about, which is the security of the Department of Finance with respect to the preparation of the budget. With the greatest respect to the Premier, staff may not always tell him everything he needs to know in order to do his job properly. It's been known to happen. Will the Premier, Mr. Speaker, through you, will the Premier ensure that there is a proper investigation and a report to Nova Scotians through this House about the breach of budget security, and in particular, will he find out and tell us whether anyone on his own staff breached budget security?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I share the member's concern, and I will do as I would do in any situation like this, Mr. Speaker. Do a proper review with my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, and in my office, and ask questions to those. But, Mr. Speaker, again, the Leader of the Opposition is stretching a long bow. It sounds to me, Mr. Speaker, like he agrees with a lot of the things that this government has done in the budget, because he's speaking about an issue, Mr. Speaker, the focus of that issue should really be on the program that is helping our fellow Nova Scotians.
The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Today, Nova Scotians learned exactly where this government stands when it comes to ensuring that health care will be available to Nova Scotians where and when they need it. This past weekend, Northside General ER was closed for 18 hours, and New Waterford for a total of 14 hours due to the lack of physicians. So my question to the Premier is, why does your government not have a plan in place to better address the issue of physician shortages in underserviced areas throughout this province?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of issues and a number of things going on to ensure that ERs do not close across this province. Mr. Speaker, we are negotiating the master agreement to make sure that all physicians are treated equitably in their funding and making sure that there is no discrepancies among ERs. Mr. Speaker, we're also making sure that we have the correct number of residency seats, as was mentioned in the speech of the budget. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to work on a fair strategy that all regions of this province are treated equitably when it comes to ER services.
The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party on his first supplementary.
Speaker, they're all treated equitably. They're all closed an equal number of time across the province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of ER closures across this province has not miraculously corrected itself. Residents in Tatamagouche, North Sydney, Annapolis, New Waterford, Digby, Glace Bay, just to name a few, don't believe for a second that this government has a plan to ensure the availability of physicians now, or more importantly, into the future. My question is to the Premier. Could the Premier explain why his government has failed to comprehend the future needs of underserviced communities across this province when it comes to physician recruitment?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member opposite for his concern in rural areas, Nova Scotia as well. Mr. Speaker, Digby, for example, has been successful in recruiting and ascertaining an ER doctor. It is going forward in the hiring of 2 nurse practitioners. Mr. Speaker, that ER will be servicing the population of all Digby area as soon as those people can be hired. Mr. Speaker, also the member opposite forgets of the stellar EHS system that we do have in this province. We do have the best emergency system in all of Canada.
The Honourable the Leader of the Liberal Party on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I suggested one initiative that the province should consider by dedicating 20 med school seats per year, offering free tuition to those students who agree to work in underserviced areas for 5 years. This will help to ensure that these communities will have stability into the future, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Premier is, what initiative does the Premier plan to implement that will ensure Nova Scotians living in underserviced communities will once again have 24/7 emergency room access?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the suggestion. Is one that we've been working on for a number of months with the university, Dalhousie University, who does have our medical program in this province, to make sure that there are 20 seats available. As the member opposite may or may not know, New Brunswick is going to be setting up their own medical school, which will be freeing up some spaces within that school. We'll be utilizing those beds, those spaces, as well as 10 more spaces to use for Nova Scotia students to go through that medical program to come back and work for Nova Scotia.
The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is through you, this time to the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, the good people of Tatamagouche have been waiting years for this government to live up to promises of renovations at the Lillian Fraser Memorial Hospital. As a matter of fact, it's been 3 years and 15 days since that renovation was first announced. People all along the North Shore dug deep into their own pockets to raise $500,000 for their share of the upgrades, but were met with conservative inaction. So my question for the Minister of this, if it is ever going to be completed, will the North Shore residents getting everything they were promised?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the residents of the North Shore, of course, will be receiving as much as we possibly can provide to them. Mr. Speaker, it is in design work right now. We're making sure that the needs of that community will be held. Mr. Speaker, I can assure the member opposite that Phase 1 has already been done on that facility, which was, of course, working on the electrical systems, the mechanical systems of that facility, and then the renovation, I believe, of the inpatient piece will be to follow. Mr. Speaker, so I can assure the member opposite that work will be begun. Unlike, and I want to do this. There's another press release that came out from the NDP that was quoting something that wasn't happening in this province, which actually was. And I'm going to quote from that press release: "A nursing home to serve the Cobequid region was first promised in 2002, but nearly 6 years later, more than a dozen promises, including one in 2005, ground has yet to be broken. This badly needed 150-bed facility." Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to table a picture of construction ongoing at that wonderful facility just off the Hammonds Plains Road, which serves all that region, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister said on February 21st, "We believe it is very important to provide all rural residents with a broader range of health services." Mr. Speaker, the Minister said on February 21st, "We believe it is very important to provide all rural residents with a broader range of health services so that they can get the care they need and deserve in their own communities." But that's not apparently what they've decided to do. The Colchester East Hants Health Authority reports the scope of the work does not include upgrades to all the inpatient rooms or the redevelopment of the laboratory, registration area, or emergency department. So my question for the Minister is pretty simple, Mr. Speaker. Which one is it, Mr. Minister? Upgrades to the lab and ER or not?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite brings up an interesting and very important issue for the residents of Tatamagouche and, of course, the North Shore of that county. Mr. Speaker, we will continue. We've already announced Phase 2 will be going on. Mr. Speaker, construction, I hope will begin as soon as design work is done. Mr. Speaker, I do also want to quote from an article that was in the Chronicle Herald. I believe it's the Bedford-Sackville Daily News. And basically, this came from the member for Sackville-Cobequid, which of course is my critic, my healthcare critic. And he also quotes, "Recently the Conservatives have promised 2 area facilities, but no ground has been broken." Again, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to show a really nice document here, a picture of work that is going on right now.
The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the Minister has gotten that out of his system now. Maybe we could all get on with the business. Mr.
Order,
Speaker,
please.
Mr. Speaker,
Order, please. I can't hear the member.
Mr. Speaker, the Lillian Fraser ER has been closed a total of 26 days since December because of the lack of ER doctors. Mr. Speaker, my question is, why doesn't this government admit it has no plans to continue emergency care in rural communities?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, once again, they're not paying attention to what's going on this side of the House, what's going on in the government of Nova Scotia, looking at the changes that we've been talking about, transformation in the health system all across Nova Scotia, to look at the opening and making sure the continued opening of ERs across this province, to look at the added primary health care services that we want to apply to give to all Nova Scotians, making sure that they have the services that they need in all areas. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do our work. Mr. Speaker, if they choose to ignore it, well, that's just their fault.
The Honourable, the member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. Yesterday, the Pictou County Health Authority announced it was shutting down its intensive care unit for at least 2 weeks because the interns are exhausted, Mr. Speaker, and I'll provide a picture of that ICU for the Minister when it closes. Those specialists have been working on-call shifts every second and third day for a month, Mr. Speaker. That's unsustainable for any professionals, Mr. Speaker, let alone a specialist who makes a life and death decision on a daily basis, Mr. Speaker. My question for the Minister of Health: what is his government doing to ensure the people of Pictou County get the quality medical treatment they deserve in a timely fashion?
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we know, this is an unfortunate situation for the residents of Pictou County. Of course, the people going to the Aberdeen Hospital. Mr. Speaker, it is very important that this information became available to the community to make sure to make plans for the future. Mr. Speaker, we are, through Doctors Nova Scotia and the department, currently negotiating the master agreement. Plus, we need to make some of those changes and have them available so that the recruiting can become easier for all ICUs, ERs, and such across the province. Mr. Speaker, what we understand at this point that locums were unable to come at this time, but they do hope to have that ICU open by mid-May.
The Honourable, the member for Sackville-Cobequid on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Aberdeen closure is just the latest in a series of cracks we have witnessed in the fragile healthcare system here in the province. The ICU is often described as the heart of the hospital, allowing for the critical care for the most ill patients here in our province. Since last spring, the intensive care units in Bridgewater, Amherst, Truro, and now in New Glasgow have gone into cardiac arrest, Mr. Speaker, shutting down their services. My question to the Minister of Health: why has his government failed to respond to an ongoing problem that threatens the core services in regional hospitals throughout Nova Scotia?
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, I can quickly say that through the master agreement, a lot of the issues that were brought up from the other ICUs across the province, more specifically the ones in Bridgewater and Amherst, will be addressed. Mr. Speaker, we do have the added issue of a lack of a doctor at the ICU in Pictou County, and I know that the District Health Authority is doing everything that it can do to recruit another professional for that area. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy and very happy to know that some of that work is being done right now.
The Honourable, the member for Sackville-Cobequid on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the government's own guide to transforming healthcare in Nova Scotia concludes that every regional hospital outside Halifax and Sydney supply a minimum core services: safe, reliable emergency care, family medicine, general internal medicine, general surgery, anesthesiology, and critical care capability, Mr. Speaker. Although there is an obvious shortage of internists, why is his department only recruiting for 3 internists in Kentville, Antigonish, and Truro?
Question. The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the member opposite knows, that all district health authorities are responsible for recruiting to their areas. Mr. Speaker, I know that the Pictou County Health Authority is doing all that it can do to recruit an individual for that site. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I'm bullish about the future there, that they will have the full complement of ICU doctors to an internist to offer that service on a full-time basis.
The Honourable, the member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Department of Education was ever so gracious to hold a briefing on the status of its school capital construction list. As most expected, 11 of the 13 new schools scheduled for construction from 2008 until 2011 are in government ridings. Much to the disappointment of students and parents who have patiently waited for renovations and or construction in non-government ridings, little progress has been made. Mr. Speaker, every student in Nova Scotia deserves a safe learning environment.
Please.
Regardless.
Order, please. The member for Kings West has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, every student in Nova Scotia deserves a safe learning environment regardless of their geographic location. My question to the Minister, why has the government ignored deteriorating schools desperate for repair and reconstruction in non-government ridings?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, thank you for the question, and we certainly do agree on one thing, and that's that every student in this province deserves a top-notch facility within which they should study. And I do appreciate the reference to the briefing that was prepared and delivered yesterday by my staff to make sure that people completely understood the capital construction process. And as part of that report, I would also like to draw the members' attention to the fact that in that 2003 list from which we are working, 5 schools have been completed. 3 of those have been in non-government ridings.
The Honourable, the member for Kings West on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we're obviously talking about going forward. This government has disregarded the priority list of school boards in the past, and I have no doubt they will continue that trend in the future. In an article published in today's Chronicle Herald, the Department of Education acknowledged that they had received a phone call from the Minister of the Crown asking for a newly constructed school instead of a renovated one. That request was granted. Mr. Speaker, this government is building new schools in ridings where they only require renovation and ignoring schools in other ridings that are in dire need of renovation and reconstruction. My question to the Minister, will the Minister stop pitting schools against one another and base school capital construction lists on merit?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I would again refer to the 2003 construction list. On that list, we had 12 new schools and 45 renovations projects. And I would like to remind the member opposite and all members of the House that I was pleased to join the member opposite as we officially opened the renovations to his former school in his riding.
The Honourable, the member for Kings West on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, yes, a picture is worth 1,000 words usually. But, Mr. Speaker, the Minister has only been around since 2006, and that school was a priority of AVRSB. Mr. Speaker, many students continue to be subjected to unsafe learning environments, and this government has turned a blind eye. Mr. Speaker, Dartmouth High is one of these schools. First opened its doors in 1959. The last significant renovation has occurred in 1967. It has been among the top priorities of HRSB since 2005, yet no progress has been made. To add further insult to injury, this government has promised renovations for Dartmouth High. So, Speaker, I want to repeat, 11 of 13 new schools scheduled for construction are in government ridings.
You have a question.
This is an initiative.
Order. You have a question.
This is an initiative for conservative ridings, not a provincial-wide initiative. My question to the Minister, will the Minister commit to working with the school boards and honouring their highest priorities rather than ministerial requests?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite and to members of the House, I'm not prepared to repeat my answer, but I will say that all requests from school boards are given serious consideration. There is a capital construction committee review committee that reviews all of those requests, and they give advice to the minister, and when that advice comes, I will be taking a new list before the capital construction and before cabinet. But I will say this, that every school in this province who has a need has an opportunity to identify that through their school board onto my department, and we will respond. We have with a $400 million plus commitment, and we will continue.
The Honourable, the member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my question's for the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. Our province justifiably prides itself on its natural beauty and its built heritage and its many tourist attractions. Many of the roads, however, that lead to those attractions are in dreadful shape and have been getting worse. A critical part of marketing our province is ensuring that travellers do have a safe and pleasant experience while they're here. Tourists post their impressions, good, bad, or otherwise, on websites that are read by thousands of people around the world, and the reports on Nova Scotia are an embarrassment. I ask the Minister, how does this government justify allowing our province's roads to deteriorate so badly during the past 9 years?
The Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's almost like fishing in the bathtub, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure where the honourable member's been for the last 9 years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government has gone from a $47 million capital budget to last year, Mr. Speaker, to $160 million. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of the capital budget this government's put forward for roads. Mr. Speaker, we have a commitment of 2,000 kilometres over 4 years. We're meeting that commitment. The Premier's made a commitment, Mr. Speaker, to twin modernised highways from one end of Nova Scotia to the other by 2020, Mr. Speaker. That's a proud record, and I'm proud of the government and proud of the Premier of that commitment, sir.
The Honourable, the member for Halifax Atlantic on our first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear that the Minister is proud of his time spent fishing in a bathtub. Where I have been during the past 9 years has been around this province. Some of those places have in fact been in Cumberland County. One thing I know is that the good people of Cumberland County have been working very hard on developing a Fossil Cliffs Interpretive Centre, and they've worked very hard to make that dream a reality for themselves. But the roads... They are, and they should be very proud of their own hard work. But the roads, unfortunately, which go to that product, are a bone-jarring experience. And I ask the Minister, with all the talk about gateways, what about acknowledging that the gateways, the secondary roads of this province, are the real gateways to the rural communities and their tourist attractions?
The Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member opposite for not only acknowledging the hard work of the people of Cumberland South, but their good judgment when it comes to election, their members, Mr. Speaker.
What kind of bargain was that? That was good. That was a good bargain.
Mr. Speaker, the secondary roads in Cumberland South are not unlike secondary roads across this province, Mr. Speaker. They were neglected for 50 and 60 years, Mr. Speaker. But I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, as the MLA for the area, I'm committed to looking after those people and those roads in my constituency.
The Honourable, the member for Halifax Atlantic on our final supplementary.
I'm glad to hear that the Minister is committed. Many tourism operators, however, throughout the province identify the roads to their tourism attractions, often developed through the hard work of the individual members of the constituency, as a real challenge to the industry. And our tourism has huge potential, especially for our rural communities, if you can get to those attractions. My question to the Minister is, when will the government begin seriously considering economic factors and be rational in assigning its paving priorities?
The Honourable, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate the question, and it's a very important issue for all rural Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to our roads. Mr. Speaker, I find it quite interesting that folks get up, stand in this House, and suggest to us that we cut taxes from such things as highways, and then get up and demand that we do more work. Mr. Speaker, which way can it be? It can't be both ways, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of what this government and this Premier and the previous Premier have done in regards to roads in this province, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you, the public survey that's been taken, Mr. Speaker, shows that Nova Scotians recognize and appreciate the great work that this government has done in rural roads in Nova Scotia, and we'll continue to do so, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The list that I have shows that the next question comes from the Liberal Party. It is the same list that we used the first day in question period. It is the same rotation that we used the last question period we had in the last House. And this is the order that we are going to follow today. If there is discussion, we'll have it after this question period. The Honourable, the Minister for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government first announced the construction of a new junior high school in Glace Bay way back in 2003. The opening of the school was originally scheduled for 2007 and then 2009. Mr. Speaker, the government assured the people of Glace Bay the project would get underway immediately. Mr. Speaker, the construction has been delayed a couple of times. My question for the Minister is the construction of a new junior high school in Glace Bay still a priority? Has the construction of any other schools been bumped ahead? And does it mean another delay for the construction of a new junior high in Glace Bay?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I do believe there were 3 questions there. I will answer the first question, which was, are we still committed to a new junior high school in Glace Bay? And the answer is yes. And the member opposite would know, as all other members in the House know, I've answered this question many times, and I will answer it one more time. One of the things that we are required to do is to find a site that is suitable for the construction of any new school. And we are continually working through site selection and assessments of a site to make sure that that site is safe. And my commitment to the member opposite and to this House is that when we have a safe site, the construction on the Glace Bay Junior High School will begin.
The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, students and the people of Glace Bay have been waiting for a commitment. They need the commitment from this government, Mr. Speaker, and from the minister. I'm sorry if the minister doesn't like that I asked 3 questions. If you build the school, I'll stop asking the questions, Mr. Speaker. My other question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, will the minister stand in her place today then and say, Mr. Speaker, will the minister stand in her place and say that the money that has been allocated way back and announced way back in 2003 for the new junior high school in Glace Bay, that money will not be redistributed elsewhere. It will be there for a new junior high in Glace Bay.
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite does know, the junior high school in Glace Bay is one that this government is committed to, and in the process of that commitment, there was a scope of work identified and there was a price tag put on that scope in 2003. We will build to that scope of work, and we will make that commitment to do that when we have a safe site.
The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Department of Education officials have been quoted as saying that the construction of Glace Bay Junior High may be delayed. The Deputy Minister has suggested that the money allocated for Glace Bay Junior High could get reshuffled to other projects, including a recently added school in the Halifax Regional Municipality. So my final question for the Minister, Mr. Speaker, is, will the Minister tell her Deputy Minister to keep his hands off the money allocated for Glace Bay Junior High and tell him to get on with the building of a new junior high in Glace Bay?
The Honourable, the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, the reference to money being redirected to a school in another riding, I would like to provide clarification. I know the project that the member speaks of. The dollars that were in that project for 2008-9 have not changed as a result of a new announcement, and we will continue to work with the planning on that project the same as we are on every other one.
And now, Frank. The Honourable, the member for Halifax-Chebucto.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. My question is for the Minister responsible for Conserve Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, last year this House adopted the Environmental Goals and Sustainable Prosperity Act that set a goal for the province's reduction of greenhouse gases by 10% below 1990 levels to be achieved by the year 2020. Since then, additional prestigious studies have suggested that the global situation is much more pressing than the Nova Scotia goal contemplates. I will give two examples. In 2007, the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which produced the Bali Roadmap, opted for global reductions of 25 to 40% below 1990 levels. And as a second example, Sir Nicholas Stern, the UK economist and author of the Review of the Economics of Climate Change, opted for a target of minus 50% for 2050, and he said the target should be increased. In light of these studies, would the Minister tell us whether the government is about to revise the greenhouse gas reduction target in any way?
The Honourable, the Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Delighted to have a question on the environment. The NDP have been so silent on it. I was beginning to wonder that if an environmentalist around the NDP caucus was felt the same way as a mosquito in a nudist colony. So I do welcome the question, and the answer is no. We've not changed our target. It's 10% below 1990 levels.
The Honourable, the member for Halifax-Chebucto on his first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, all responsible studies of global climate change show that comprehensive, aggressive action is imperative. What we're talking about is protecting a fundamental life support system, that is to say, a livable climate. So let me try a specific number. Will the Minister agree that a goal of 40% reduction of greenhouse gases in Nova Scotia by 2020 is both desirable and achievable?
The Honourable, the Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The goal that we've set is a 10% reduction from 1990 levels. It's one of the most ambitious goals in Canada. It's about a 36% reduction of what would happen unless we began the reductions that we're going on. So it is an ambitious reduction, and we intend to meet it, and if we can, we will surpass it.
The Honourable, the member for Halifax-Chebucto on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All the experts don't agree that this is an ambitious target. Mr. Speaker, prevention is much better than a cure. In fact, when it comes to global climate change, if prevention is not adequate, then cure, in fact, is not how the problem is described. The language is of coping or of disaster impact. Will the Minister explain why, instead of taking effective actions now, he prefers that future Nova Scotians will have to cope with environmental disasters?
The Honourable, the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the honourable member that we're working hard on the Climate Change Action Plan. We are leaders. The province of BC, which is touted as one of the leaders, has a similar or perhaps even a few percentage points less in terms of the greenhouse gas reductions. We're doing things in terms of the electronic recycling program, which reduces greenhouse gases. We've conserved land in Halifax area, which has conserved greenhouse gases. I'm working with my colleague from the Ministry in charge of Forestry Sustainability, which will result in credits on greenhouse gases. We've just announced in the budget a $3 million public transit fund, which will help reduce greenhouse gases. We are working very hard and will continue to work hard because we're committed to protecting our environment and to providing our children with as good an environment and as good a quality of life as we have now.
The Honourable, the member for Pictou West.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to you is to the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. This morning, the Minister, myself, and others in this House attended the Canadian Cancer Society breakfast. And one of the priorities for cancer control outlined by the Society was the need for more stringent pesticide controls. Their pamphlet states, research is uncovering worrisome links between pesticide exposure and cancer, and they are recommending the banning of cosmetic pesticides to help reduce exposure. They outline the first step is a change to the Municipal Government Act to allow other municipalities outside the HRM to ban pesticides. So my question, will the Minister bring forward these needed changes?
The Honourable the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Speaker, and I too, as the honourable member from Pictou West has indicated, was at that breakfast this morning and heard the comments of the Executive Director, Ms. Summers. One of the things that the province was complimented on was its smoke-free policies as being the greatest contribution right now. I believe they still say that tobacco smoke is still the greatest contributor to cancer that there is in the province. And the policies which have been established by this government are probably lead the country and have been the model for other jurisdictions. And I want to compliment my colleague, the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection. Indeed, I was sitting at the table this morning with the Mayor of Wolfville, who did take the time to talk about the issue, the recent issue of banning smoking in cars or in vehicles when there are young people present. And Mr. Speaker, we will note, and I just want to, and I know I'm going to get back to this in the second supplementary, but Mr. Speaker, is that other provinces have followed the lead of my colleague and this thing, and of course the Mayor of Wolfville, you know, who it was his council that actually initiated this in this province. So, Mr. Speaker, to indicate that we have not done anything in terms of trying to participate in the war against cancer is not accurate.
The Honourable the member for Pictou West. I think you better speak loud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question was on cosmetic pesticides, but it's nice to get the update on smoking. But, Mr. Speaker, last fall, the members of the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities voted unanimously in favour of legal changes that would allow them to enact meaningful pesticide bylaws. And towns like Wolfville and Truro want to take action to protect their residents and ban the cosmetic use of these pesticides. The Minister should also be aware of the numerous Nova Scotians who want to see these changes in place. A recent poll showed that 69% of Nova Scotians want pesticides banned. Even large department stores are now taking the product off their shelves. But this government is refusing to make these necessary changes. So my question, can the Minister tell this House, tell UNSM, tell the people of Nova Scotia why he's refusing to bring forward these changes?
The Honourable the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. I'm just going to ask one clarification. The statistic you used, 66% of Nova Scotians. I heard another source this morning that said something about 52 or 53, a CRA poll, and I would really seriously appreciate seeing the hard thing, because I haven't seen it. But, Mr. Speaker, I do recognize and have consulted with the UNSM on this, and I will make the same statement I made yesterday in at least 2 media interviews. We are still considering our legislative agenda. We recognize this is the #1 issue of the UNSM, and we are still actively, we have not completed our legislative agenda for this session. I said that yesterday when we introduced the Amendments to the Municipal Government Act.
The Honourable the member for Pictou West on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister indicated in his interviews yesterday a number of options that was being looked at that should apply the HRM rules to all municipalities, whether there should be a province-wide ban, perhaps a ban on sale of the product, or whether the government should just do nothing. But, Mr. Speaker, doing nothing is not an option. Municipalities need the right to ban this product from their jurisdiction. So my question through you, Mr. Speaker, while he and his colleagues continue their discussions on the possible stronger legislation, will he at least grant the municipalities the same bylaw-making powers as HRM?
The Honourable the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Speaker, it is a complex problem. The honourable member knows that, and I appreciate him for raising the issue. He cited the case of the municipality of the town of Truro, and what they did was currently within it, and they've set up a registry, and I've been told by some people they don't need any more authority. There's adequate protection on the MGA now. They want to set up a registry. I've been told by other people that if you allow the banning of cosmetic pesticides, the next thing you do is you'll be banning them, the pesticides for the logging operations. You'll be banning them for blueberry operation, banning them for other agricultural purposes. There are some people who say that giving the municipalities the right to ban is not the answer because it will create a patchwork across the province. There'll be no consistency. Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of questions. This is not simple. And what we will try to do, we are still considering what type of legislation, if any, would be the best thing in the interest of Nova Scotians at this time.
The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, as perennial as April showers, district health authorities have been working with the Department of Health since last year on their business plans for 2008-2009. Mr. Speaker, considerably less predictable, however, is when DHAs can expect approval from government on plans that govern everything from where health services are delivered, more importantly, the proper mix of health human resources to deliver that plan. My question for the Minister, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister please indicate this year's target date to approve the 2008-2009 District Health Authority business plans?
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite knows that last year we had some fair amount of success where the majority of the business plans were approved by, I believe, the fall. Mr. Speaker, I will commit again to work our best through the department to have those business plans approved by September.
The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, April 3rd, 2007, the minister stood in this House and stated, and I quote, "If I could find a way to approve those budgets before we approve the budget here in the House, I would try and do so." He also stated he'd work as fast as he could. Mr. Speaker, Colchester East Hants received approval of its 2007-08 business plan February 12, 2008, just 48 days before the fiscal year end. Mr. Speaker, it's been an ongoing problem for several years now. It continues. My question to the Minister, why is it not possible for his government to table the District Health Authority business plans at the same time the budget for this province is being debated?
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I know the member from the official opposition is answering my question for me, but I won't go down that road. Mr. Speaker, I do want to work as quickly as I can through the department. Of course, there is always challenges on bringing those budgets to as close to zero as we possibly can when it comes to balanced positions. Mr. Speaker, I know that we've come in over the last number of years with the district health authorities, with the work that they've been doing, to within 1/2 of 1%, I believe, of budget, which is absolutely phenomenal, where we were way off in previous years. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank them for their dedication, the district health authorities, for bringing business plans to the department, ones that we can support and work on. Mr. Speaker, early last year, I believe it was August and September, we did have the business plans approved, I believe, for Capital Health, for Cape Breton, for, I believe, Valley. We had it for not Colchester, for Cumberland. So the majority of the business plans were approved at a very short, very quick rate. Mr. Speaker, there were others that did have challenges.
The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, you've heard the old saying, the tail wagging the dog. So it would appear that instead of sitting down with the DHAs to work on an overall strategy on health plan and accompany financial resources, DHAs go through the business planning process. They wait for government then to finally get its act together. So, Mr. Speaker, my final question for the minister is, can the minister please explain to us how district health authorities are expected to manage their hospitals along with their health human resources when approvals of business plans, without them, that is?
The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to stand in my place today at a government that has just tabled the 7th consecutive balanced budget in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, it is incumbent. It is incumbent upon us to have business plans that are zero, that they are balanced as they come to our department when it comes to the services available in those areas. Mr. Speaker, it has happened in the past that those budget business plans have not been in a balanced position, and it does take a fair amount of time to come to an agreement with those district health authorities when it comes to the services that they do want to expand, the services they do want to do. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that they've been working hard to have balanced budgets come to us. There will come time to time when we will not have a balanced budget business plans coming from those departments or from those district health authorities, and we will work our hardest to make sure that they are. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I will commit to the member opposite to have them done as soon as possible, to have them available for September.
The Honourable, the member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The morning commute, I want you to know, Mr. Speaker, the morning commute from Timberlea, from Lakeside and Preachville is becoming more confusing every morning. When the 103 merges with the 102, the traffic snarl that results there is absolutely inexcusable. The problem has been brought to the department. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a few moments of your time.
The time allotted for oral question period has expired. The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please call public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
Please call Bill number 125, Public Service Act, Labour and Workforce Development.
Bill 125, Public Service Act, Labour and Workforce Development. The Honourable, the Minister of Labour and Workforce Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On April 24th, the government introduced a bill that would establish a new Department of Labour and Workforce Development. And I thank you for using the full title of the new department. This is important that it be used because it is a new department, Mr. Speaker, with significantly new added responsibilities. Now, when the Premier announced the Department of Labour and Workforce Development in the throne speech last November, he noted that one of the challenges facing Nova Scotians was the retaining and recruiting of skilled workers, and that positioning those workers for the new industries would be vital for the success of the new Nova Scotia. And so, Mr. Speaker, the creation of the Department of Labour and Workforce Development will help us make a very key contribution to that goal that is so important to all Nova Scotians. The divisions within the Department of Labour and Workforce Development, Mr. Speaker, ensure that every Nova Scotian's experience in the workplace is a safe, healthy and productive one, that they have recourse and support when things go wrong in the workforce. Our divisions ensure that our workers enjoy public safety even in their off hours so that they can look forward and trust in their retirement plans. And I mentioned workplace safety first. I'm going to get to the workforce development part of it, but I mentioned workplace safety first, Mr. Speaker, because just 2 days ago we were here, or just yesterday here on the National Day of Mourning. And we want to remember and continue not only on that day, but on days throughout the year to remember those workers who died in their lives on the job in 2007, and to rededicate ourselves, Mr. Speaker, all of us as MLAs in the respective responsibilities and spheres of influence we have, and of course my department in its key role to lift high the culture of safety and encourage people to put safety first, both employees and employers, Mr. Speaker. And we're pleased that we've made gains in regard to reducing those tragic statistics, but we need to do more, Mr. Speaker, and we will not rest until not only do we have a safer Nova Scotia, but the safest Nova Scotia across Canada. Mr. Speaker, workplaces are changing, and this division is also changing to keep abreast of the safety needs of new jobs. And it's working hard, I want to assure you, to protect Nova Scotians from injury and illness at work. And along with my division, the Occupational Health and Safety Division, Mr. Speaker, and a very hard-working member, leader of that division, Jim LeBlanc, I want to mention the work of the Workers' Compensation Board. And I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if members have seen the ads that are out. I had a chance to preview them. They are heart-rending. I want to thank the family members who have allowed themselves to be interviewed, because they share dramatically what it feels like to have a loved one who doesn't come home any longer. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Workers' Compensation Board. They've done some good work also in regard to young workers, and that's a challenge that we have as young workers go into the work. Young people oftentimes are unaware of the dangers and don't have the experience, and so the Workers' Compensation Board has done great work in training and alerting workers. And Mr. Speaker, at the Labour Ministers' Conference, I was asked as the lead minister, as one of the ministers in a jurisdiction that's leading the way, to speak to this issue and to show the portal we have working with young workers, and a lot of that's due to the work of the Workers' Compensation Board. In addition to safety, Mr. Speaker, we set and meet standards for fairness in our labour services and labour standards divisions. We are very, very proud in this province of the work of our conciliators and our labour negotiators. I think members on all sides of the House would agree that they have done a yeoman's job. I talk to our mediators now and then, and I marvel at the sort of perspective that they have in order to sit down and to work through some very complex issues and to do it in a way that's fair to everybody, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank them. And in regard to labour standards, we have made significant progress. We now protect workers on designated holidays, retail workers. We have raised the minimum wage, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the committee that worked so hard on that, and in particular do want to single out one person. All four worked very hard, but I do want to single out Mr. Rick Clark, who's on that committee, because Mr. Rick Clark works on the minimum wage committee as a volunteer. He is on the Occupational Health and Safety Advisory Committee for me, and I do want to mention him for his work, and of course pass on my public condolences to him. Many of us were at the service, the very moving service, for his son who died rather tragically and suddenly, and so our hearts go out to Rick, and we want to give the best thoughts of this legislature to he and his wife Judy, and to Nicole, and to Tara, the partner of his son. So our thoughts go out to them. But that minimum wage, Mr. Speaker, will lift the minimum wage to the low income cutoff range. I think one of the first provinces to do so, if I'm not mistaken. And this, of course, fulfills a commitment that we've been making in terms of poverty reduction, which is led with assistance from me so ably by the Minister of Community Services. And so the Division of Labour Standards works hard with those who are not unionized to help get them protection, and the Division of Labour Services works hard with unionized members to make sure that there are fair settlements. But we do much more than worker safety and worker protection and standards for fairness. And I want to get to this because one of the new aspects of the department that's exciting to me as minister is the addition of the workforce development, because it helps workers take advantage and retrain and look towards the future and get the skills and the training that they need in order to take fullest advantage of those opportunities. It works with adults who didn't get their high school education and now have an opportunity to do so. And if any of you have ever been at an adult high school graduation, you will know how moving it is. I've had the opportunity to be at a few of them, a couple in Kentville, one in Windsor. And Mr. Speaker, these are individuals who've overcome incredible odds and got their high school and then are moving on to pick up other skills. It really does your heart good to go to one of those graduations and to hear the stories and see the determination, the excitement and the enthusiasm. And so the workforce development side of labor and workforce development works in that regard. The adult education program, the Nova Scotia School for Adult Learning, which has 150 sites across the province, and resources to research careers and to help take advantage of labor market information as well as find jobs in the province through programs such as Opportunities in Nova Scotia. The Apprenticeship Training and Skill Development Division of Workforce Development, of Labour and Workforce Development, ensures that training offered in training institutions and in industry, and I do want to thank Nova Scotia Community College. They're the main training institution that we partner with, but there are many others as well, but I want to thank them. And to ensure that their apprenticeship and their skills are at the highest quality in order to help our province and ensure our province's economic future is even brighter in the coming years than it's been in the past. And then, Mr. Speaker, we have a public safety division where we enforce regulations on equipment, products, services, things that Nova Scotians use on a daily basis, and just assume that they'll be safe, and they're safe because our division works so hard at them. Things such as elevators, gas boilers, building codes, and I would be amiss if I didn't mention the work of the firefighting services and the work that Mr. Cormier and that whole department does, and all our volunteers, firefighters and professional firefighters across this province who work so hard, and our paramedics, of course, some of whom have deserted their occupation for a little while to be of greater service or of additional service. A long, long while, yes, some of them will for a long, long while, but sometime he'll go back and volunteer maybe in his senior years when he's 65, unless he follows the footsteps of his predecessor, Mr. Ron Russell, and he will be here for a long, long, long time. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I do want to commend the work that's done by our firefighters, and then the work that we do in the regulation of alcohol and gaming. This division ensures the sale and distribution of alcohol, games of chance, and film classification are all taking place in ways that protect Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker, and they work very hard at this and do an excellent job. And then, Mr. Speaker, as people's careers draw to their close, one of the areas I've spent a lot of time on recently, another division of the Department of Labour and Workforce Development, is the one that protects people's pensions in their retirement, Pension Regulation Division. And I do want to commend the head of that particular division because it's a real challenge, Mr. Speaker. We hear of horror stories in California where pensions are paying out 20 cents on the dollar. And we certainly do not want that to happen to Nova Scotians. So Nancy McNeil-Smith, head of our pension division, is committed to ensuring that pensions are healthy and strong private pensions here in Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, there are many different divisions in the department, the new Department of Labour and Workforce Development. I would be amiss if I didn't mention how excited I am to have a Deputy Minister of the caliber and the enthusiasm and the experience as Margaret MacDonald. And it is something that I'm very, very grateful for, that she was willing to come on and take on this task, because the Department of Labour and Workforce Development is going to be, and already is, one of the key departments in moving into this new Nova Scotia. It will protect Nova Scotian employee rights from youth to retirement, but it will integrate those protections with the skills, training, and strong workforce that will make them meaningful and desired in the future. Educators often talk, Mr. Speaker, about the 3 R's. In Labour and Workforce Development, we have the 4 R's: recruitment, retention, repatriation, and retraining. Strategies that will encourage people to come back and work in the province. And we're now have all the critical components that we needed to have a coordinated strategy for the future. We have them all together in one department, Mr. Speaker, and the whole will be better than the sum of the parts. So let me just end very quickly, because these demographic challenges are coming upon us. We know of an aging population. We know the pyramid is inverted here in Nova Scotia, similar in many ways to what's in the Western world. And so we need to work very hard to make sure we have a well-trained and an adequate workforce for the future, Mr. Speaker. And unless we do that, then many other things will not take place, and the quality of life we enjoy will not be there. So we now have this new department. It's an exciting department, Mr. Speaker, pulling together the old Department of Labor with its emphasis upon protection, upon workers' rights, upon labor standards, fire services, pension regulation, with labor and workforce development, marrying them together with a synergistic energy, Mr. Speaker, that will make this department one of the key ones. So with those introductory remarks, I'll close my comments.
Okay.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the honourable member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to have an opportunity to rise in my place and speak to Bill 125, which is a very, very short and fairly simple act, essentially establishing a Department of Labour and Workforce Development. Mr. Speaker, just to put this bill in some context, we used to have a standalone Department of Labour in the province of Nova Scotia until probably the early years of the Ham majority government. I think at that time the Premier Ham, had made a commitment to have a smaller cabinet, and in the process of looking at some fiscal restraint and not as big an executive council, the Department of Environment and Labour was combined. And so really in some ways, Mr. Speaker, this is not an initiative that we haven't seen in the province of Nova Scotia before, let's put it like that. There has been a standalone Department of Labour before, and we're returning to that situation. This particular configuration of the Department of Labour, though, as the Minister has indicated, is not precisely the same as the old Department of Labour. There is a new component or a new element to it, and that essentially, Mr. Speaker, is this business around skills development or workforce development, which is taking an existing section which exists in the Department of Education, as you would know, Mr. Speaker, and moving it into this new department. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Labour, as we know, is largely responsible to create a regulatory climate for safe workplaces in the province, and they do that in a variety of ways and through various components of the department. They have many inspectors who ensure that workplaces are secure and safe and follow all kinds of complex pieces of occupational health and safety regulations. And for that, we are very grateful, Mr. Speaker. And we know we have as well the Workers' Compensation Board. The Minister made reference to this and to yesterday as the National Day of Mourning, where we all attended the service here outside Province House, recognizing the 12 families and the 12 Nova Scotian workers who unfortunately lost their lives in workplace accidents over the past year. And the work to improve upon workplace safety so that we can reduce not only tragic deaths but also injuries in the workplace largely falls on the shoulders of the men and women in this department. And, Mr. Speaker, it's a very, very important feature of the Department of Labour. And in addition, as the minister also indicated, this is the department that mediates the relations between employers and workers in the province and ensures that there are some uniform standards in terms of pay, minimum wages, and hours of work, uniform closing, and holidays and so forth, Mr. Speaker. So it's a very important department. It impacts on a very large number of men and women, families, communities, businesses in the province of Nova Scotia. And now, Mr. Speaker, I think quite appropriately, putting the workforce development component into this department, we will see some new activities out of the Department of Labour. Mr. Speaker, we all know that we live in a very different time where our economy has changed quite dramatically and we face challenges. North American employers are investing less and less in workplace training, and this has historically been seen by many employers as a cost rather than an investment. And we need to do more work to convince employers that investing in their workforce will increase their productivity and their bottom line, and that they not see investment in workers as a cost, but in fact that they see it as a great benefit. And this department will be tasked with that job of ensuring that human resource development is important and that it gets the proper attention and the priority so that every man and woman who is able and willing to work are able to work to their full capacity. And that they not just have skills, but that they have the kind of skills that will really benefit our economy. And increasingly, Mr. Speaker, we know that those skills are the skills of innovation, that you don't just come to the job prepared to work with your particular little widget as it goes along an assembly line, but those days of the assembly line have dramatically changed, and now we need people in a knowledge-based economy who are able to problem solve, and in fact who can tell the employer how to make the productivity better, how they can do things more cost effectively, how they can innovate. And so we need that kind of skills in our workforce, and we need employers that understand those are the skills that will benefit them, as well as workers who are prepared to have confidence and are welcome into the production process in a way where they make a contribution beyond just being a cost of production. It's a complete different mindset in many respects, and this department is an important part of developing a different mindset. So, Mr. Speaker, we certainly support the idea of a standalone Department of Labour with a workforce development component. We note that the labour market development agreements between the federal government and the province of Nova Scotia are being negotiated and will result in a devolution of a number of federal government employees into this department to run employment centres around the province. We sincerely hope that that transfer proceeds seamlessly, and that this government will maintain the employment centres and services, particularly in small towns across the province, and that the labour force, the men and women who need these employment centres and services, will not be in any way disadvantaged and have less services available to them. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't have a lot more to say with respect to this bill. But I do, before I take my seat, want to register my disappointment that on the one hand, the minister and the government talk almost lovingly about the respect and awe they have for the working men and women in this province. And I find it a little bit hard to swallow at times, Mr. Speaker, given that Bill 1 is still on the books of this legislature, that the debate on Bill 1 has been suspended or postponed on some level, that the government haven't had the courage to bring that bill to a vote. And just to remind members of the chamber what Bill 1 is all about, Mr. Speaker, Bill 1, as you know, is the legislation that this government made its centerpiece piece of legislation in that very short fall session that we had, where they brought forward legislation that would take away the right to strike of the hard-working men and women in healthcare and community service organizations across the province. And Mr. Speaker, it is a little bit galling, I have to say, to have a government on the one hand talk about their commitment to working men and women in this province and their belief in the great job that they're doing on the one hand, and on the other hand, they have the audacity to bring in legislation that shows such contempt for the men and women who work in our healthcare system. And they compound that contempt by not allowing that bill to proceed through the democratic process of this House, to have a full debate, and to result in a vote in this chamber. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the day when they find the courage to bring that bill here for a vote. And in the meantime, we will support this legislation, even though there is a bit of a contradiction in the way the government proceeds. But so what else is new, Mr. Speaker? Thank you.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the honourable member from Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and please to rise on this bill, which takes, I guess, a look back in the history of this province to a time when environment and labour were two separate departments. This government, however, when it took office in '99, decided that they would fuse the two departments together. So our caucus does welcome the change and placing the emphasis on a standalone Department of Environment and now a Department of Labour and Workforce Development. So in terms of the Department of Labour, over 450,000 Nova Scotians go to work every day. And it has a number of very, very important functions and roles to play. One that has been mentioned by the minister this evening is workers' compensation, and that WCB is a very, very significant body that does support workers and families when they do have an injury in the workplace. We have had in Nova Scotia a very, very poor history of safety in the workplace. I think some small improvements have been made, especially in relation to tragedies. We were averaging, over 20 for the last number of years, and we saw it reduced last year. Also, that department, in addressing a long-standing issue in this province, and that was adequate compensation for chronic pain. And again, that's an area where over I think 5,000 cases now have been investigated and rightly and duly compensated. I believe one of the areas that workers' compensation still has a challenge with, and it is an important part of their mandate, and that is around safety in the workplace. And I think moving over people from the Department of Education to develop the workforce development component, I think is going to bring a strong education piece, a strong education platform to the Department of Labour. We all know that lives should not be put on the line, at work because there's inadequate education and safeguards in place. So I think that's a huge area. And I think this new department will respond perhaps a lot quicker to developments, for example, like we had this winter. This winter was an extraordinary one in terms of the number of accidents relating to slips and falls. In fact, there was a 60% increase in injuries reported to workers' compensation due to slips and falls with the kind of winter that we had in this province. So again, I think getting information and an education piece out to all workplaces, I think will go a long way to reducing those claims and days lost on the job. So I think that's where this workforce development and an emphasis on education will definitely show up. But I don't think there's any part of this department that is more important and will be a real challenge, and that's to keep up with the requirements of the workforce. The workforce is in a constant state of change. We now hear, for example, of workers who have 5, 6, 7 different careers during their work lives, and a significant part of that is retraining. It is certification. It is the apprenticeship process, and so I think this will be an aspect that this new department can actually put a lot more emphasis and a lot more targeted seminars, workplace instruction for companies, because I personally take the view that the worker that we need to concentrate on to keep in this province is not the one who isn't here, who is in Alberta or a potential immigrant, but I think it's the workers that are already here in Nova Scotia raising their families. That if we can help retrain, we can also help upgrade their skills. Those are the workers that can give their companies, their communities, and the province many more years of very productive labor. And so I think one of the very, very big areas that we've had through the Department of Education is around adult learning, the GED program, the skills upgrades such as the work activity centers, where we have people going to those schools who only have maybe as far as junior high, and really need a major infusion around literacy in particular. This is one of the areas now that is being identified very strongly by a significant number of employers in this province, that in order to upgrade their workforce, they have to go back to the very fundamentals of improving the literacy and basic numeracy skills of their workforce. We're talking about 30 to 40% of adult Nova Scotians who have significant deficiencies with literacy. So this makes it very difficult to even give pamphlets and information for workers to read. around safety in particular, that the Department of Labor and Workers' Compensation in particular are very focused on. There have been, of course, examples in our province where employers recognizing the value to their company of upgrading their workforce. One of the ones that I first heard about was a company that has since closed its doors, but it was a canning industry in Berwick, Avon Foods. And at that company, their line workers had very limited education for the most part, and the plant manager decided to bring a GED program right into the plant. And he kept increasing the percentage of his workforce that had a grade 12 equivalency in education. So I think those are the kind of models that more and more companies need to look towards, and I think the emphasis of moving education as a significant part of labor will bring dividends to the workforce of Nova Scotia. If you take a look at the possibility of government looking at perhaps a tax credit for an employer that would allow a member of the workforce to take some time off the job and to go back to school, whether it be for a very short term or for a long time, and especially again, as I said, in the development of basic literacy skills. So those are the kinds of things that I think the new workforce, labor and workforce development department should put a major emphasis on. We all know that many employers now do not have a sufficient number of employees, and their projections are even forecasting some very challenging times. So again, last year in this legislature, a bill was passed by government that would do away with mandatory retirement, with no longer having to retire at 65. But again, many of these workers, do need some upgrade and some skill development. And again, that's another area that we know these workers are here in the province. And they have spent perhaps a lifetime, or in many cases now, perhaps even a shorter time, on the job with those companies who, in fact, do need a new trade enhancement, a new skill, and this will be a department that can definitely make some improvements in those particular areas. I just want to finish by saying that our caucus sees the separation here, the emphasis placed on workforce development as a positive one, and we will support this legislation going forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I'll now recognize the Honourable Minister of Labour and Workforce Development to close debate on Bill 125.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the members for their comments and for their suggestions. I was particularly pleased with the comments of the member for Halifax Needham, who was very positive, and appreciate her comments up until the very end, but that's okay, Mr. Speaker. We can't all be perfect. Anyway, and seriously, I do thank them for their comments and for their good wishes towards this new department, because I think it does have some very exciting potential. And with those words of thank you to the critics, I would like to move second reading of verse. What am I supposed
125.
to do? Close debate. I'd like to close debate. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for your help.
Thank you. The motion is for second reading on Bill number 125. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill number 125, an act to amend Chapter 376 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Public Service Act, respecting labor and workforce development.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 126, Fair Access to Regulated Professions Act?
Bill number 126. The Honourable the Minister of Labour and Workforce Development.
Thank you very much. The Premier announced the plan to introduce a new Department of Labour and Workforce Development in the throne speech last November. He noted, as I mentioned before, that retraining and recruiting skilled workers is vital to the new Nova Scotia. Building a globally competitive workforce, as my critics have mentioned, is absolutely vital to creating winning conditions for our province. To truly create these conditions, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia needs a straightforward, accountable process to register and certify professionals from other jurisdictions in Canada, other provinces in Canada, and throughout the world. We need a process that allows professionals easy access to clear, understandable, transparent information about registration practices and requirements. We need regulations that will ensure regulatory bodies are able to accomplish these objectives. And we need all these things, Mr. Speaker, to make Nova Scotia a more attractive destination for professionals who are considering moving to this wonderful province that we have the fortune of calling home. So, Mr. Speaker, in that regard, on April 24th, I introduced a bill that would help newcomers in Nova Scotia navigate the certification and registration process and find a job in their chosen profession. The Fair Access to Regulated Professions legislation is intended, Mr. Speaker, to offer this framework that will help regulatory bodies to be even more transparent, objective, and timely than they are now in delivering certification and registration with their professions. And I'd like to emphasize, Mr. Speaker, because it's very, very important, that under this Act, standards for Nova Scotia certification will continue to be established by the self-regulating professions themselves. And that's an important point to make, Mr. Speaker. I made it when I introduced the bill, and I make it again here in this House. What this legislation is about is not standards. That's in the hands of the self-regulating professions. But what it's about is giving professionals from other jurisdictions clearer, more timely access to certification and registration processes that will help them connect to the Nova Scotia workforce more easily. Regulatory bodies will maintain control of their own professional standards and will have the authority to ensure that only qualified workers receive certification in this province. So the legislation is fairly minimal, Mr. Speaker, but nonetheless important, we feel, because it will support accessible, fair, objective, and transparent registration processes. It will also ensure that regulatory bodies, Mr. Speaker, have a procedure in place for individuals to appeal registration decisions. It's designed to address the needs of nationally and internationally educated professionals applying for registration, and it will support the regulated professional bodies as they work to comply with Chapter 7 of the Agreement on Internal Trade, which was signed by all the ministers of the provincial departments, territorial departments, and the federal department, all the ministers of the Crown then. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill will clarify the certification process across regulated professions ranging from engineers to lawyers to crane operators, quite a wide schedule that you've seen in the bill in both Schedule A and Schedule B. We intend to let professionals across this fair country of Canada and throughout the world know that Nova Scotia is taking a progressive and transparent approach to welcoming newcomers and connecting them, if they qualify according to the self-regulating profession standards, to the workforce. In developing the draft of this legislation, government consulted with regulatory bodies and immigrant settlement associations, and I was very pleased, Mr. Speaker, that when I introduced this bill that the Minister of Immigration, my colleague, my seatmate, a great friend, a wonderful MLA, and a hard worker was able to be there, because a lot of the work that this bill is intended to facilitate will really fall on his shoulders, Mr. Speaker, and not on mine, and so his help is needed. And these groups, Mr. Speaker, the immigrant settlement groups, MISA, and many others throughout the province, and the regulatory bodies, they provided valuable input, and they helped us shape the bill to make sure that it's the best bill possible. So based on the consultations that we had with the regulatory bodies and the immigrant communities, it's our view that this legislation will improve and facilitate a transparent, open registration process, while at the same time ensuring that the regulatory bodies maintain control over standards, as should be the case. It will provide a framework, we hope, that will assist all self-regulatory bodies in achieving fair, transparent, and timely registration practices. It's also important, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, that the regulations, because oftentimes the opposition quite rightly say, listen, the legislation's fine, but we want to see the regulations because the devil's in the details. And so the regulations of this bill will not be proclaimed until we have full consultation, and they are vital to setting out the bill, and so the commitment is to have consultation on them as well. We will appoint a review officer, Mr. Speaker, to work closely with the regulatory bodies to support them in meeting the legislation's objective, and that person will be appointed once this bill passes and when we work with the regulations. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the bill is fairly straightforward. As I said, it will help ensure a timely, transparent, accountable, consistent information for those who are seeking to work in some professional capacity here in the province. It will be tailored so that professions where a high degree of risk exists will be recognized, and yet at the same time to provide flexibility for professions where practices already meet or exceed the obligations of the proposed legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, I've gone on a bit of a length about this bill, but I do think it's important. I know my critics understand the bill well, and they've had a briefing on it, but I want all Nova Scotians and all members of the House to understand the bill because it does not touch the self-regulating professions. They still set the standards, what they demand. All it really states, but an important statement, Mr. Speaker, is that this needs to be done in a fair, consistent, transparent manner. There'll be a review officer to help out with that process. There'll be some appeal, and there will be flexibility in terms of how this is set out, and there will be full consultation once we move forward to drafting the regulations, which are important for any bill. So with those comments, I'll take my seat.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the honourable member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this indeed is a very important matter that the minister brings to the floor of the legislature. And before I speak to the principles of this bill, I'd like to thank the minister for organizing a bill briefing prior to the House coming back in session, to have an opportunity to actually look at the draft of the legislation and meet with senior bureaucrats in the department as well as the minister, and having an opportunity to meet the new deputy minister of the Department of Labour. That was very much appreciated, Mr. Speaker, and I think it allows for us to do a little preparation in terms of legislation that is being brought forward, and that can only improve upon the debate in this legislature, as well as ultimately the legislation that we ultimately pass. Mr. Speaker, this is a bill, as the minister indicates, that seeks to give clear information and a timely process to individuals who, generally speaking, have credentials, education and practice credentials from outside of Canada in a variety of professions, who come here to Nova Scotia and apply for membership and a license to practice in a whole variety of professions. And the bill applies to more than 37 professions, many of them health professions, 19 of them health professions. For example, it will apply to someone who is trained as a medical doctor outside of Canada. It will apply to someone who is trained as a nurse and wants to be a registered nurse in the province of Nova Scotia, to a pharmacist, to an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, a social worker, a whole variety of health professionals. But not just health professionals, Mr. Speaker. It also applies to other professions that regulate, are self-regulating, that have a membership, that have credentials that you're required to have attained a body of knowledge to practice in the province of Nova Scotia, including barristers, including engineers, including land surveyors, cosmetologists, interior decorators, geoscientists, chartered accountants. So it's a really important piece of legislation for a very large number of people. And the minister talks about the intention of the legislation. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to get into that at this stage because I understand that the moment of interruption is at hand, and perhaps I should adjourn the debate until a later date, and I'd be happy to do that. So I move adjournment of the debate.
Thank you. The motion before the House is to adjourn debate on Bill 126. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government business for today, and I'd now ask you to call upon the NDP House Leader for opposition business.
Thank you. The Honourable the Official Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, the order of business tomorrow will be Bill 37, the Cosmetic Pesticide Act, and Bill 20, the Health Insurance Protection Act. And I now move that the House do adjourn to meet the hours between 2 and 6 tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at 2 p.m. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. We have arrived at the moment of interruption. The adjournment debate was chosen and announced earlier. Therefore, be it resolved that the government recognize the increased cost of fuel, electricity, and other direct expenses incurred by organizations that offer day programs for disabled individuals and provide appropriate funding, lifting the freeze on funding that most such organizations have experienced for at least a decade. Chair will now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, tonight's late debate is a very important matter to many parents in the province of Nova Scotia living with adults with very challenging issues and disability, mental and physical disabilities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the reason that topic is on the agenda tonight is because most of these organizations in the province of Nova Scotia have had their operating budget funding